Okay, and now for our next session, we're going to talk about how interoperability will shape the world of Web3 finance. And just a fun fact, it was said at Fest this year in California that the world in Web3 for the year is, guess what? Can anyone guess what the world for the year is in crypto? Anybody? Interoperability! Yes, he's got it right. Please welcome to the stage, Francisco Pinto.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me here today. I hope the conference has been good for you. I'm surely enjoying it a lot, so congrats here to the organization. It's always a pleasure to come back to Warsaw for such a nice event. So today we'll be breaking some barriers. Do you know that 9 out of 10 Web3 payment apps still use centralized databases to store your data? Crazy, right? These are Web3 payment data, payment applications. And when I say payment applications, it's not just the payment ones. Everything related to financial operations, stuff like invoicing, payments per se, accounting, expenses, billing, all that data, all those applications on Web3. I'm saying 9 out of 10 just in case, but I don't know anyone that doesn't use a centralized application, a centralized database. So today, in order to talk a little bit more about that, we are going to go through the premises of Web3. We are going to talk a little bit about the status of the current payment market inside of Web3 and why it's built this way. And lastly, we're going to talk a little bit about Request Network and how Request Network is creating the path for this more decentralized financial system on top of the blockchain. Starting by the beginning, right? Web3 is something that we are going to discuss a lot, but why do we even need Web3? Maybe we should start with that. It seems like a lot of people forget it. So since the beginning of the internet, Web 1, you probably already heard this story, but Web 1 is it was the time where you could only consume data on the internet. Then Web 2 came out, and you started being able to create stuff and interact with data on the internet. But a problem then arose. The problem is that a handful of players started controlling pretty much all the applications and traffic on top of the web, and that's exactly what gave birth to and created the need for the Web3. In order to that's exactly what gave the need to Web3. And the idea of Web3 came out with a lot of different promises: the decentralization, the ownership, the interoperability. Web3 was born to actually empower individuals to actually own that data, and we are not seeing that much on this space, at least. Although we can get there, we are still far, and we still have a long path ahead of us. And payment is definitely a super hyped use case in the last year. It's been talked a lot. Coinbase is all over it with the summer campaign. And it's predicted to grow a lot in the next few years, which makes a lot of sense because payments in crypto, especially if you're talking about like cross-border payments, are way cheaper, faster, and easier than the traditional finance, right? But payments are not only about the transaction of value itself. They need to have some kind of contextual details in order for them to even, not to be useful, but to be even legal, right? You can't really, especially if you're a company, you need to have some kind of data attached to your payment, stuff like invoices, receipts, in order to prove the track record and to prove your accounts. And that's where the issue comes in. The blockchain doesn't really give you a way to create that data. You can do it, but it will be costly and it will be scattered around different blockchains. So so this data, which we are going to call contextual data, it's really hard for companies to payment companies to store it in a decentralized way. Just to add a note there, that the contextual data is exactly what answers to the question, why was this payment made, while the blockchain only gives you the information of how was this payment made. And I'm going to use like a small analogy to kind of explain the problem here and the current state of the financial operations in Web3 right now. So I'm using the applications as islands because they are very siloed right now, but I wanted to use bridges next, so islands makes more sense. And if the status was we would be good, right? Every application is connected to the blockchain. It doesn't have any other way of storage. These are real dApps, and they are connected to the blockchain. If I make a payment on application A, I can see it on B. But I don't have any way to store the contextual transaction here. If I need an invoice, there's no way that I'm going to have it on that platform. So applications started building these small blue things on each one of them. These are the centralized databases. And this is where they store both the transactions that they do with the blockchain and the contextual data around that transaction. Who was it for, so payer, payee, the description of the transaction, currencies, values, everything starts being stored on these centralized databases. But the problem is that now the users, they use one application, but they need, especially at the stage we are on, we don't have a lot of huge companies on Web3 payments. They need, if I'm handling my finances in Web3, I need to use multiple applications. And that brings another problem, because before everything was on chain, I could I could bring my data everywhere that I wanted. But now I have my data siloed on different islands. And applications, in order to kind of go against this, they built this. So they started creating bridges with other applications that provide not the same value, but the next step on the workflow. So an application that is handling their finances now in Web3 has to use a couple of payment apps, depending on whatever the payments that he's doing. An invoicing app, and let's say an accounting app, like a subledger. They all need to exchange data because you need the flow of data to end up in the accounting app for it to be then reported to the government or whatever tax reasons that you need the data for. But the thing is that what we actually created on top of the blockchain is just three Web2 companies that are doing transactions on chain. These are Web2 companies. They hold their data. They don't give you full open interoperability, and you are kind of dependent on them now. And you're kind of dependent on them because if a new app comes and let's say you are the user of this, the owner of this company that's using the current 3 apps, and a new invoicing comes, let's call it invoicing app 2.0, and you want to test it out for a couple months. It has these new cool features that would be nice, but your workflow is already built with these 3 apps, and the payment app and accounting app currently don't have a bridge to that app. So you're already limited by the other apps that you're using wanting to create a bridge with that app. And I mean, yeah, sure, you can kind of download all the data, move it there, but then you're going to have to do that every time if they don't make the bridge. Or are you going to go through all that cost just to test a new app that may be good, but maybe not? There's a very big barrier here, and that disincentivizes you to kind of test new things. And that's exactly how you end up with monopolies like in Web 2. So all this, if you want to do a Web 2 app like this, fine, but let's not call it Web 3 because definitely it's not. The thing is, and why we believe that most applications are building these apps this way, and even the ones that started as Web3, because there's no good solution to kind of store the contextual data. It's very hard to store decentralized data on your own, especially if you are like a startup, right? You have to worry about runway. You're not going to be building infrastructure as a payment app. You're just going to use whatever is there. And what is there is, and what is perceived as the more efficient way right now, it's the Web 2 way. So they all ended up, even the ones that started fully Web 3 ended up switching to the Web 2 way in order to be competitive with the others. The second problem is that, as mentioned previously, if you want to store all this data on the blockchain, you really can't. Because you'll also be less competitive than the others, you'll pay more, it will be slow, and it will be scattered around multiple blockchains. So that's exactly what we are trying to achieve with Request Network. With Request Network, we are trying to build this decentralized financial database that can store your contextual data. It allows you, we built a lot of tools for actually creating and storing the data that you need to complete the data of your payments. We basically, what we do is that we attach this data, we create this data on IPFS, we attach it to the payment, and whenever you want to retrieve it, it will retrieve both information, both data structures to you. Basically, Request Network is the why that payment was made. Anything that you want to know about what that payment was for, you can see it on Request Network. The how was done, it's on the blockchain, and we aggregate the both. So you can move from something that it's like this into something that it's more like this. The permissioned way for the permissionless way. And you might argue that this image might give the idea that we are centralizing everything in Request Network, but Request Network is open source and it has open data standards. The other image didn't really make justice to Request Network by just adding one more application, so I felt the need to create another one to show that you can choose from whatever pool of applications there are on top of it to handle your finances, and the data is completely interchangeable between all of them. In fact, the big difference is that now you own your data. Instead of the Web 2 way, where the data is stored on the centralized databases and you just access it, now it's the other way around. Now you own the data and they just access it. That's the biggest difference. The first point about ownership is exactly that, right? You own your actual data. The second point on privacy, Request Network allows you to add data that it's completely transparent. So if you're a DAO or something and you want to have completely transparent financials, that's very good, and we allow you to do that. If you don't want that, which is normal, not a company normally doesn't want to have all the transactions public with the contextual data of what those were for, like especially like invoicing and receipts being scrutinized every day would be a nightmare. So you can have that privacy on request. We can encrypt it, the data for you before putting it on the network. We encrypt all the data with both the payer and the payee transaction, the payer and the payee keys. So only them can then access the data. It's not possible for us or anyone else to access it without the other two agreeing on sharing that data. Lastly, we have interoperability, and on that, I mentioned that you can move your data freely across all the applications on top of request network. We also cover like 25 blockchains, so you'll have all the data of that. And to kind of showcase interoperability a little bit more, I'm going to show some demos of these new products we've been building to help developers start their journey in request network, but also to showcase the interoperability between different apps built on request network. Okay, so these are exactly the apps I was talking about. We have request checkout, which simulates kind of a payment app. We have request invoicing, which simulates an invoicing app. And we have request scan, which is more like an explorer for request network. You can see all the data there, all the data from the network there. It is, you can only see the unencrypted data, of course. And it kind of simulates what an accounting app would do, because an accounting app, what will do normally, or a subledger, it will read all the data and kind of label it, but it won't normally create new data. So let's start with the invoicing one. Oh. Just a second. Okay. All right. So basically, all our templates are built with web components, so they are reusable. You can just copy them. You have that list there. In here, we have this form for creating an invoice, also as a web component that also gives you like a quick preview of it. In here, we are going to use it for a quick example on a hacker kind of issuing an invoice for the hackathon. So he won the bounty of request network. He needs to send an invoice because we need an invoice in order to pay him. And it gives that example with fake data, of course. We cover a lot of chains in here. By default, we already have a lot, but if you want to add more, it's really easy. For testing purposes, it will use Sepolia. As mentioned, first place on the bounty, lucky guy. I wish I could speed it up a little bit. Okay, so basically this is what we'll see. You try to create the invoice, you sign it so that the network knows for sure that it was your wallet that created this invoice. You wait a couple seconds, and it's done. So the invoice is created. It's been persisted on the request network, and you are now able to see it here. The first one, 1000 FAU. You switch to the payer wallet, and you'll also see it here automatically, and you just pay it. All right. Yeah, these were new wallets, so you have to approve the transaction first, right? Okay, so this closes the first video. All right, transaction paid. After that, we have here the request checkout, and it's on this one that will display the interoperability. We've already created some invoices on the other video. Here we are kind of doing, this is our playground. You kind of can build whatever payment checkout you need. In this case, we are doing a payment checkout for ETHWarsaw, where you can add all the data you want. This is all contextual data, like the buyer info, seller info will be used for billing in case it's necessary. You put up these things we are putting here in hand, but it can be easily passed by your front end. You don't really need to have the users do this. You can choose whatever currencies you want to accept, and this is the experience of paying it. It shows the currencies that you chose, the data that the buyer submitted. It does a swap if you input the value in USD, and you just pay it. Okay, so the cool thing is that now you come to the invoicing template, that it's not connected in anyhow besides request network to this template here, and you can see the invoice being created here. And basically this is a very short video just showcasing the final result. If you plan to build something like this, maybe we'll try to sell it to ETHWarsaw. Okay, so it's just adding more data. And lastly, we have rec scan. So if you want to see the network data, at least the requests, you'll only be able to see the unencrypted one, but the payments you can see everywhere, all of them, because they are on the blockchain, so all of them are public. Yeah, you can see every transaction here. You can see all the requests. So it basically joins the blockchain data with the contextual data from request network, everything linked together. All right, so to close it, I want to just touch a little bit our core values. It is the interoperability we talked about in these templates, ownership. So we believe that everyone should own its own data, at least have the chance to own it. If they choose to give it out, that's fine by us, but at least give that possibility to the end user. And efficiency, it's something that's very important in a special way to us, because we believe that Web3 ideals are very strong, but we don't think that Web3 ideals will bring the mass adoption or like the next billion users that is currently being said. So if you're building tools, we are with the tools that we build, we make sure that they are more efficient than the traditional ones while keeping the decentralization. That's how we think we'll attract the companies and the users from the traditional market. And that's how we think that we'll be able to move from Web 2 to Web 3, the current financial system. Request Network is sponsoring the hackathon. If you're participating, check out our bounties. The components that I just showed are part of these bounties, so if you use them for something, that would be really cool. We also have this grant program. We are open source. If you ever want to kind of contribute to it, we'll be very happy to help on anything. And yeah, just come join us. We are really we are really focused on this mission of making decentralized finance. So happy to onboard also with us anyone that wants to help. My name is Francisco. I'm the protocol lead of Request Network. Thank you.
Woohoo! Can we get a round of applause for Francisco? Now, is Orest here? Is Orest in the room? Yes, fantastic. Why don't we have you set up? In the meantime, you can ask Francisco 1 or 2 questions. How about that? Do we have any questions for Francisco? What would you like to know about any of what he said? And by the way, I did not know that so much of the data that we actually use in transactions is hosted on centralized platforms.
Yeah.
I feel very icky. I feel lied to. You know, like when you go on a date with someone and they're really cool and then you find out they have a double life, that's what I feel like currently. So do you guys have any questions for Francisco? Yes, I will bring you the mic.
I actually have 2 questions. So
yeah, of course.
First one is, what's your business model? And the second one is, do you have an app for processing payroll?
Our business model is that we take a very small fee for every data that you create on the network. But we are actually kind of, for small startups, we kind of abandon that fee until they reach a certain maturity. Nice. The second question was?
Do you have any application for processing payroll? You have one for payments.
I actually, the one that I showcased here on the checkout, you can use that for making actual payments.
Yeah.
It was built more in a sense to be like a template so that people can build on top and customize it, but it can actually make payments.
Yeah, that's what
I didn't show it on the video, but there on the playground, the page that I show where I was tweaking the values. Yeah. If you customize it as you want in text, you can just copy it after. There's a snippet of code behind it. You can copy it, put it in your website, and it's working.
Nice. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Francisco. Please give another round of applause for Francisco.